Good morning, and welcome to the January 2019 open meeting of the Federal Communications Commission, the most unusual monthly meeting since I joined the Commission in 2012. Today's meeting is extraordinary for two reasons. First, we are welcoming Jeffrey Starks to the dais, making this the first time since last June that the FCC has been at full strength. Second, because of the partial government shutdown, we do not have a formal agenda this morning. Now, while I am certainly much more enthusiastic about the first topic, I would like to get started this morning talking about the second. I know that this past month has been trying for everyone at the FCC. For most of January, we have been living under a cloud of uncertainty, constantly checking our phones or turning on the TV for any updates on when things might return to normal. And then this past Friday, the good news finally came. After 3+ weeks of furloughs and frustration, a staff-wide welcome back email alone wasn't going to cut it. And so I camped out for a while in the 12th Street lobby on Monday morning to personally welcome back many staffers to the office. Now, many people I spoke to that morning and over the past 2 days have had a unique shutdown story to share. But there was also a common theme. Almost to a person, people grew tired of being home and were genuinely enthusiastic to get back to work. Now that says something, of course, about human nature and the value that we derive from our labor, but I think it also says something specifically about working at the FCC and the people who do so. The late President George H.W. Bush often said, and I quote, "There can be no definition of a successful life that does not include service to others." And that certainly is true for the career staff at the FCC. Working here is not just a job. It is a public service, and that is how I feel today. That is how I felt during my 4 years as a career staffer during previous administrations. We have chosen to work here because we share an intrinsic desire to give back to our country. Together, we have an opportunity to improve the lives of the American people through communications technologies. I am grateful and excited that we finally get to roll up our sleeves again and return to our critical work to advance the public interest. Now, my primary focus is on the future, but it's important that we acknowledge the contributions of members of the FCC team who continued working during the partial government shutdown, in some cases without pay. So thank you to the staff of our operations centers that remained open, ensuring that the Commission's critical eyes and ears remained vigilant. To meet our vital mission of protecting the safety of life and property, our public safety personnel helped to address 176 events where our partners in law enforcement and national security needed radio frequency-related support to carry out their missions. They also provided emergency support to a 911 call center and coordinated with the Department of Homeland Security and industry to facilitate the restoration of cell phone service in a national forest. Thank you as well to the Enforcement Bureau's field offices, which operated with skeleton crews to investigate multiple spectrum interference complaints from the Federal Aviation Administration, including probing interference with air traffic control communications in 4 different states, and locating an intruder who intentionally interfered with air traffic controllers in Florida. Thank you as well to our auctions team, which successfully concluded bidding on the United States' first auction of millimeter wave spectrum for 5G services, conducted training and preparation for license application review, and continued critical work for our upcoming 24 gigahertz band auction. Thank you to the Incentive Auction Task Force and its partners in the Media Bureau and the Office of Managing Director for doing the blocking and tackling that have kept us on track to meet our demanding transition repack schedule. Thank you to the staff of our International Bureau, who worked to advance proposals to internationally harmonize spectrum and facilitate global roaming, in addition to participating in interagency meetings about national security and U.S. leadership in 5G. Thank you to the attorneys in the Office of General Counsel, who skillfully guided us through the myriad legal issues associated with the shutdown. And finally, thank you to the team in the Office of Managing Director for their work to minimize the impact of the shutdown on the agency and its staff. To this point, I've made it a point not to recognize anybody by name so that deserving staff don't feel left out, but in this case, I'm going to make an exception. Everybody in the FCC, all of the American public, frankly, should know the following names: Carol Edwards, Ruthie Baker, Renee Coles, Tanya Robertson, and Rafael Fernandez. Under Carol's leadership, this intrepid team processed every single FCC employee's time and attendance reports for both pay period 26 and pay period 1, the end of last year and the beginning of this year. Now, this was an incredibly time-intensive task, requiring that the team members access each individual time and attendance report and manually complete it. Canceling leave where appropriate, adding appropriate transaction codes, you get the point. Carol and her team continued to work during the shutdown without pay to ensure that all those employees who were exempt would receive their pay in a timely manner. And when the shutdown ended, Carol and her team worked for the entire weekend and many late nights to get the job done so that furloughed FCC employees could receive a paycheck by the end of this week. And judging from several emails that I've gotten over the past few days, that paycheck made a big, big difference. So if you see Carol, Ruthie, Renee, Tanya, Raphael, or Mark Stevens, the managing director, be sure to thank them. In fact, I see Mark in the back. Or is anyone else I mentioned here?
Carol is there.
Oh, Carol, could you please stand up? They have truly gone above and beyond. Carol, you and your team have truly gone above and beyond to minimize the impact of the shutdown on all of us during a very difficult situation. And so you deserve and you have our deepest gratitude. Thank you for that. Looking ahead, it's because of people like Carol and all of the FCC's remarkably talented and dedicated staff that I'm optimistic about the road ahead. All of you have proved your mettle over the past month, and I know that you will continue to do so as we continue to pursue our vital mission of bringing digital opportunity to all Americans. And speaking of looking forward, turning at last to the first topic I mentioned, we have another reason to be happy about what lies ahead, and that is our newest commissioner, Mr. Jeffrey Starks. And I want to take this opportunity to welcome him to this well-deserved role. I had the privilege a few minutes ago of swearing in Commissioner Starks, witnessed by his beautiful family who are here today. Commissioner Starks brings to the FCC an extraordinary range of accomplishments. He graduated from Harvard College and Yale Law School, where he was a member of the Yale Law Journal. Didn't quite make it to medical school, though. But he has an extensive track record of public service, having worked at the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit, the U.S. Department of Justice, and within the FCC's Enforcement Bureau, among other positions. Significantly, he hails from what I believe most objective observers would agree is the greatest state in the Union, the sunflower state of Kansas. He has an optimistic outlook on life, which is quite surprising when you consider the fact that he is a fan of America's teams, the Kansas City Chiefs and Royals. But in all seriousness, when you have the pleasure of sitting down with him, as I've had the honor of doing several times over the past few months, you will see that he brings to everything he does a deep expertise, a can-do spirit, and a very thoughtful Midwestern approach. And Commissioner Starks, it is a pleasure having you seated on the dais, bringing the FCC back up to full strength, and I would welcome any comments that you would wish to make at this time.
Yes. Well, I have to say first off that given the agenda that we have today, I have a broad bipartisan voting record. But seriously, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the warm welcome today. I'm deeply honored to serve as an FCC commissioner. As the last few weeks have shown, being a public servant is a calling to serve a mission bigger than yourself. Until today, my time at the FCC has been as a staffer in the Enforcement Bureau. And as a staffer, I know firsthand that this agency has and is filled with dedicated public servants. Over the last few weeks, in particular, I've been working from my old office on the 3rd floor. And nearly every day, whether it was in the kitchenette or in the copy room, I would run into folks who were working there without pay. I'd thank them for their hard work during this tough time, and we'd talk and exchange pleasantries. But I know that it was only the workers that I happened to see that I got the chance to thank them. And so regardless of whether you were furloughed, unable to come in and serve, or whether you were an accepted employee who did continue to serve and protect the American people, I want to say thank you. Throughout my career, I've focused on protecting the most vulnerable and holding wrongdoers accountable. I'll continue to pursue those goals here in my new job. I'll look forward to working with Congress, my fellow commissioners, and the FCC's outstanding staff to advance the public interest. All communities have a right to be heard on communications policy, regardless of their resources. And for my part, I subscribe to the deep wisdom of Justice Ginsburg, who said, "I'm a very strong believer and listening and learning from others. I will always be listening and learning. But before I move on to my announcements, I'd like to thank my family for being here today and for, as ever, their love and support. I have two of my heroes here today, my mom and my dad, Dr. Starks and Janet M. Starks, Esquire. I have Dr. Starks, my twin brother, who's my partner in crime in this world. And then, of course, my lovely wife, Lauren, who's been along with me on this journey, and Christopher and my wife and my families are all here as well with my two kids. Now I'd like to turn to my talented acting staff. First is Daudeline Mamay, who is going to serve as my acting chief of staff and legal advisor on wireless and international issues. Daudeline is currently in the International Bureau. And has previously served as Commissioner Clyburn's wireless legal advisor and as the Enforcement Bureau's chief of staff, among other roles at the Commission. Next is Michael Scorato, who's going to serve as my acting legal advisor for media and consumer protection. Mike is joining from the Enforcement Bureau, where he was a special counsel for the Bureau Chief and has also served as legal advisor to Commissioner Clyburn. Previously, he was a vice president of policy at the National Hispanic Media Coalition. My acting legal advisor for wireline and public safety matters will be Randy Clark. Randy has rejoined the Commission following service as FCC counsel to the Senate Commerce Committee. And prior to his work there in the Senate, Randy was the acting deputy chief on the FCC's Wireline Competition Bureau. My acting confidential will be Renee Coles of the Office of Managing Director, and Renee is, of course, no stranger to the 8th floor. She previously served as staff assistant to Commissioner Copps. And as the chairman mentioned, one note about Renee, she is a payroll specialist and has been hard at work over the last several days and during the shutdown to make sure that all FCC employees received their pay this week. A big thank you to Renee and the payroll staff for your dedicated service. And last but not least is Natalie Martinez, who is going to serve as my acting staff assistant, and Natalie served as confidential assistant to 5 successive general counsels at the Commission, including Commissioner Carr. Thank you, everyone. I'm very excited. Let's get to work. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. There's one more page hiding here in the back. Andrew Manley has joined my staff as a legal fellow. Andrew comes to us from the Media Bureau, where he has been an intern and a fellow. He graduated from the University of Colorado Law School this past May. Thank you, Andrew.
Welcome. Would any of my colleagues like to make any announcements?
Well, I welcome Commissioner Starks and look forward to working with you on many different things and issues that we may disagree on. I know we'll do so honorably. So, two, I want to associate myself with the chairman's good words on the thanks to the staff, those that were working and those that spent many time with their families and were happy to return, as I was in moments. So I thank them for all of their hard work, and I appreciate it. That's all I have.
Sure. I also just want to echo the chairman's sentiments, and at the outset, thank the FCC's tremendously dedicated staff, both those that were furloughed and those that worked here through the shutdown. We had a chance on a couple occasions to get coffee and bagels, both here and with our staff and public safety officials working up in the Columbia lab, and these are just the best of the best. I first stepped foot in this building 15 years ago, working as an intern in the Enforcement Bureau. And from then up till now, I mean, every day I'm impressed with the dedication and the professionalism and the commitment to mission that we have across the agency. I mean, they are the reason we get everything done. And the shutdown was tough times. It was tough times for a lot of people, but we had a lot of dedicated folks that kept things moving. As the chairman mentioned, a lot of our public safety operations were still going. Our auctions were still running. And so very grateful for everyone that participated in that. So thank you again to the FCC staff for their service. And also on great news, really, really pleased personally to welcome Commissioner Starks on board of the agency. We had a chance to meet your just wonderful family this morning, and they are rightfully beaming and proud. It is a tremendous privilege for them to get to see you sworn in. For my part, I'm very much looking forward to working with you on the commission. I think you're going to be a tremendous addition. I know your family has a history of working in medicine across rural communities in the country. I think that positions you very well to contribute among a lot of different things we do on telehealth and telemedicine issues, and I look forward to working with you on those. I'm not really sure what took you so long to make it through the confirmation process. I really don't think it had a lot to do with you directly. I think it was probably someone else that ended up slowing things down, and I can
You
only
should have
imagine-
shaved. Would have helped.
I can only imagine what that feels like to be held up based on concerns with someone other than you. But I'm glad that's all in the rearview mirror and that you're here with us. And I also want to welcome, obviously, your team to the commission and welcome them back, those that have been here before. It's really, really great to have the agency up and running at full strength, and really look forward to working with you. Thanks.
Commissioner.
Well, this meeting is different. And as you heard my colleague say, that's for two reasons. And the first is we can finally welcome Jeffrey Starks publicly to this dais. And he is not unfamiliar to people at this agency. And I am thrilled to know we are going to have his expertise inform our decisions. I like that, Jeffrey, you and I are bookends to this crew. There's a metaphor there, you can read it. And I am looking forward to being a little less lonely in these parts, and very much looking forward to your take on the decisions before us. Now, the second reason that this meeting is different is that we are emerging from the longest shutdown in government history. And for those men and women who are here, thank you for your work while so many others were out. And for those who are not, thank you for your patience and your extraordinary commitment to public service. And for those who are contractors who work in and around this building, a special thank you, especially to the janitorial service and food service staff for whom there is no back pay. Please thank them when you see them. One other thank you to the Office of Managing Director, who, with the chairman, made it possible for the lights to stay on in this building longer than most. But now, let's be honest. This shutdown was unfortunate and reckless. We opened yesterday to a torrent of email and a jumble of delayed proceedings. We are still digging out from the effort to identify what deadlines were missed, what issues fell by the wayside, and what complaints and inquiries went unanswered. But here's what gives me hope. The people in this room and the individuals in these halls. This agency is blessed with people who are uncommonly skilled, unbelievably knowledgeable, and unconditionally devoted to the public interest. You have my gratitude. Now let's get to it, because we have a lot of work to do.
And if my colleagues don't have any further announcements, Madam Secretary, welcome back, and could you please announce the date of the next FCC agenda meeting?
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, February 14th, 2019.
Until then, we stand adjourned.
Yes. Nice and easy.
So, ready when you are. It apparently falls to the woman. My colleagues have scattered, but I'd be happy to take your questions.
I have a mic, but I can shout at you.
I can hear you.
All right, Commissioner Rosenworcel, I was wondering if you think you made some remarks about the shutdown. I was wondering if you think it will affect the FCC's ability to hire people going forward, or will it cause people to leave the FCC?
Those are good questions. I think public service is a noble calling, and I think it makes it harder for the government to recruit people for service going forward if they think that their paycheck is subject to disputes on Capitol Hill, if they think it's not clear that they're going to be able to come into the office every day and get their work done. So I'm not just worried about this for the Federal Communications Commission, I'm worried about this for the government writ large.
Hi, Commissioner. You've called for an investigation of this agency into the reports of wireless carriers selling customer location data. What specifically do you want to see the agency do on this beyond what it may already be doing, and how optimistic are you that it might take further action?
I think this is an issue of national and personal security. Something is wrong if a bounty hunter can pay a few $100s and learn where all of our phones are within a few 100 meters. That's a system that needs oversight, and we can't be shy about providing it. Now, I've been told there's an investigation, but I've asked the Enforcement Bureau for the letters of inquiry that start investigations, and they have not yet been provided to me. I'd like to see them. It's imperative to understand just what we're doing to figure out how this system went so wrong.
To follow up on that, have you, has it been confirmed to you that there are letters but you haven't seen them, or is it still unclear whether and where this investigation is at?
I know from experience that our investigations start with letters of inquiry. I've asked to see them, and I have not yet seen any copies. I'd like us to understand just how our data was sold without our permission, and I think it's important for this agency to audit what happened, to understand what third parties had access to our data and when.
Margaret McGill with Politico. You recently released letters from cell phone companies and Comcast and cable providers about robocalls. What are the next steps on that process, do you think?
Well, we're combing through all of that data. Just to review, we wrote the largest carriers in this country that provide voice service and said, what's obvious to all of us, we have a crisis with robocalls, and we're going to call on you to provide free tools to consumers to help them manage this onslaught. We're combing through those letters right now. We got a variety of different responses. Many of the networks involved have different approaches based on the technologies they use. And we thought the most prudent thing to do next was to make all of that information public. For the first time, this agency has now put out information about just what every carrier does to reduce robocalls. So I think it's useful to put it out there, and we are open to good ideas going forward.
Commissioner Dave Sherman from Reuters. In light of the indictments of Huawei and several of its subsidiaries last week, does that give new urgency, do you think, to the FCC's proceeding to bar companies that pose a security threat from access to the Universal Service Fund?
You're speaking about the April rulemaking from last year. You'll have to follow up with the chairman to identify if he believes that's a priority. It is uniquely his call as to when the agency addresses those issues next, but as a result of the indictments, they're certainly in the news, and I think there are issues of security with 5G networks that need attention from this agency. That's one of them.
Can you speak more broadly to any concerns you have about Huawei specifically and 5G?
Well, I've read the indictments, but the choices of the Department of Justice are above my pay grade and outside of my jurisdiction.
Commissioner, I also wanted to ask if you could talk about what you plan to team up with Commissioner Starks on, or if you have any initiatives in mind that you'd like to work with him on.
Oh, a whole lot of stuff, but he just got sworn in this morning, so far be it from me to assume that he's along for every ride that I propose. Well, I'm thrilled that he's here. I'm really excited.
One other question for you. Do you think the shutdown in any way hampered or slowed down the 5G infrastructure deployment?
That's a good question. We have challenges with 5G deployment in this country. We are conspicuously behind other nations when it comes to getting mid-band spectrum to market, and we have court cases that have slowed the deployment of facilities like small cells on the ground. Shutting down is not going to help. In every way, this shutdown was a slowdown.
Can I ask more? Senators Blumenthal and Feinstein today sent a letter to the FCC asking whether the commission had any involvement in what they termed frivolous lawsuits by service providers. It's similar to a letter that the Democrats on the House side sent. Do you have any evidence, or is there any evidence that the FCC actually did interfere or was involved in these lawsuits?
I was not involved in any discussions. I can't speak about what discussions my colleagues might have been involved in, but I was not involved in any discussions. All right?
Just a quick one. Can you tell us what kind of stuff you did during the shutdown while you were working here?
Sure. Came into work just about every day. I think there was one day when I had a dishwasher installed that I stayed at home. That's probably more information than you needed. But as a result of the agency shutting down its consumer complaint system, my inbox was overloaded. I got more direct inquiries from consumers than at any other point during my service here, and I made some efforts to respond to them and organize those I could not respond to so that we can get back to them now that we've reopened. I took meetings with anyone who reached out to me and had something to discuss that didn't involve a docketed proceeding or wanted to talk about policy in a broad way. There weren't a lot of those. I also responded to inquiries from Capitol Hill, questions about which parts of the statute or which rules might apply to a circumstance that they were taking a look at. And I made myself available to press during that time and called out issues that I thought deserved attention on social media.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry, one
No
more
problem.
question. Could you speak to the press release that came out from the Energy and Commerce Committee about a week ago that alleged the FCC might have been involved in some forum shopping related to the 5G order? Is that something that you've been paying attention to, and would you have any idea of where a charge like that might come from?
As I was saying to David a little bit ago, I was not involved in any discussions with respect to that issue. I cannot tell you what discussions my colleagues may or may not have been involved in.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Sure.